Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Kevin Salatino and I am the chair and Anne Vogt Fuller and Marion Titus Searle Curator of Prints and Drawings here at the Art Institute. Welcome to the museum and welcome to today's lively discussion on the language of masculinity in the work of the 19th century French Impressionist painter Gustave Caillebotte, where our speakers will explore how his paintings offer a nuanced view of gender that still resonates today. This program is made possible by the Carol Given Winston Fund for Docent and Patron Education. Carol was a member of the museum family for 38 years, introducing students and visitors of all ages to our collections and exhibitions. The fund bearing her name was established to inspire those who share Carol's love of art and learning. I'm happy to say that members of the Winston family are in the audience this afternoon. We're deeply grateful for their ongoing support of the museum. Thank you. And now it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our speakers for this afternoon's program, Gloria Groom and André Dombrowski. Gloria Groom needs no introduction to this audience. Nevertheless, as the chair and Winton Green Curator of Painting and Sculpture of Europe and Executive Director of Initiatives in France at the Art Institute, where she has worked since 1985, Gloria Groom has been involved in many major monographic exhibitions and their accompanying catalogs. On, among others, Gauguin, Renoir, Manet, Seurat, Toulouse-Lautrec, Redon, and Cézanne, and thematic exhibitions, including the critically acclaimed and hugely popular Impressionism, Fashion, and Modernity, Van Gogh's Bedrooms, Gauguin, Artist as Alchemist, Manet and Modern Beauty, and, of course, our current exhibition, Gustave Caillebotte, Painting His World. For her efforts in promoting French art and culture, the French Republic has made Gloria both a chevalier and an officier of the Order of Arts and Letters, as well as a chevalier in the Légion d'honneur. André Dombrowski is the Francis Shapiro-Weitzenhoffer Professor of 19th Century European Art in the Department of the History of Art at the University of Pennsylvania, where I'm proud to say I earned my PhD. He is the author, most recently, of the book Monet's Minutes, Impressionism and the Industrialization of Time, published in 2023, as well as of Cézanne, Murder and Modern Life, published in 2013, the latter the recipient of the Phillips Book Prize, awarded by the Center for the Study of Modern Art at the Phillips Collection in Washington. He also co-edited with Holly Clayson the volume Is Paris Still the Capital of the 19th Century? Essays on Art and Modernity, 1850 to 1900, published in 2016, and edited a companion to Impressionism, published in 2021. Dr. Dombrowski joined the Faculty of the History of Art at the University of Pennsylvania in 2008, where he is also currently interim chair of the Department of the History of Art. We gratefully recognize the John D. and Alexandra C. Nichols Family Foundation for their lead support of Gustave Caillebotte Painting His World. Raymond James is the lead corporate sponsor, who we also thank for their generous support. Now, please join me in welcoming our speakers to the stage. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. We have 3 more weeks of this exhibition, which makes me really sad. André and I started, he was part of this project from January 2023 when we had a brainstorming session about what this exhibition was going to be about. We had already determined that it would be about his paintings of men, and let me see if I can get another slide so you can look at something different. During his time as an Impressionist, as exhibiting with the Impressionists, we know that the ratio of paintings of men to women was much greater, and it just seemed to the Orsay and the Getty Museum that this was the time to really explore this, and so we got involved. And the brainstorming session was really immensely important, and the reason we're here today is because from that session, André decided this is what he wanted to write about, which was about the kind of the language of masculinity, but definitely in regards to his amazing and provocative male nude bather that we'll be talking about further on. So let's get started. Again, I always have to make this disclaimer. I think we have 30 slides, and as you know, we usually get through 8. So we will try once again to blitz this and get to the ones that we really find offer the most exciting and new and sort of personal for Caillebotte and for us. So I'm showing you 2 portraits that you've seen in the exhibition, and all of you have seen the exhibition? Yes, okay, good. Those that haven't, go. But we were talking about what are we going to talk about today? You know, what are we going to show? And these 2 seem like a good place to start in talking about what is the language of masculinity. So,
yes. Thank you, Gloria. And first, thank you for having me and for the invitation. I always love coming to Chicago, so it's a pleasure to be here. So thank you. Yes, these 2 paintings of Jules Richemont and Richard Gallo completely exemplify what I think this exhibition is about, which is the way Caillebotte is able to articulate in a really minute and detailed fashion the way and the manners men inhabit spaces, inhabit their clothing, inhabit their world, as the exhibition says. And these 2 examples show this already in a distinct fashion. Gallo much more relaxed, lounging in his chair, sitting deep in it, and Richemont much more upright. It's almost as if he's standing in that chair, right? Chest puffed out and hands folded, not quite comfortable, slouching a little over to the right, not fitting into the frame of the apartment very well. So these are already 2 different ways in which these men inhabited these chairs in these apartments. And from there, we started to just map out the variety of poses, of attitudes, of comportment that we can find in Caillebotte. And all of that is to say that what Caillebotte is so amazing at, right? And hello, hi, Ma.
That reminds me.
Say hello. What Caillebotte is so amazing at is that he focuses his attention on what by the late 19th century has become a blind spot, which is the male body. And the bourgeois male body has been designed to become a bit invisible through this black attire, through the frock coat. You see that they both wear roughly the same thing. They have roughly the same haircut. They have roughly the same beard. So by highlighting that which this culture is starting to make invisible, he just makes visible so many beautiful details and nuances of male comportment that I think is really unique for any of the Impressionists.
And even the idea of male portraiture, it's not a very commercial, it's not a very popular, these aren't commissioned. These are just his friends that he is portraying. Sometimes he gives them to him, sometimes he doesn't. They end up in the family or they end up with them. And we were really fortunate in this exhibition. I think I mentioned before, we had incredible access to family archives, but then we went a little further by looking at the photographs that they had in their albums. We were able to get the names of some of these sitters, some of these friends, and from there go through Ancestry.com and really pursue who were these people and flesh them out. And you can see he is a big man. He does have a kind of confidence and just, I own this chair attitude. And we know he was an engineer, and we also know that he was very involved with the yachting crowd that Caillebotte spent the last 13 years of his life with. It's much more expensive than just the rowing crowd. And I think this is a painting we would have loved to have had, Jules Dubois, who was actually a baker, but who becomes quite wealthy and ends up being in the entourage of Caillebotte and in the yachting clubs at the end of his life. And I just love it because it's so weird. I mean, really, don't you think? I mean, look at the space. Look what's going on.
Yeah, weird is a pretty good word. And we are looking down a bit at Dubois, which is the different from Ingres's approach to Bertin, who faces him much more forwardly, and that is that makes Dubois a bit diminutive. It makes him sort of slouch a bit in the chair. It pushes him down a bit within the apartment. He is an apartment to begin with, which is part of the weirdness is that here's somebody who's dressed for the outside, who's clearly come in, sat down with his dirty boots, in a nice armchair, and that's where Caillebotte is picturing him. So Caillebotte is so invested in the public-private distinction, what it's like for a male portrait sitter to be inside, and how they behave there, how they position themselves.
And again, he's
off,
kind of like sliding forward again. It's a very odd pose. I mean, what are we looking at? We're looking at this man's crotch as he's kind of sliding towards us. In Ang, he's sort of moved to the side, so the power thing is very apparent. He is less powerful, even though he seems to want to think of himself as having all the accoutrements of a very successful gentleman. The way Caillebotte portrays him is really getting at his more personal side, I think. Making a comment. So, and we just threw this in. I love this portrait, and it's by Renoir, and of course, it's quite different than what we've been seeing with the Caillebotte portraits of men. But Renoir needed to sell, and Renoir was a commissioned portraitist. So, unlike Caillebotte, who didn't pay his models, this is a portrait for hire. And you can see, and it's an aristocrat. It is not someone of the upper middle class that was made up Caillebotte's circle, but somebody who comes from wealth, who is very comfortable in his ability to command, no matter how effeminate it may seem, with his floral wallpaper, with his beautifully coiffed mustache that sort of, echoes the curves of the flowers on the wall. And I think it's Renoir at his most Renoir.
Yeah, look,
for a male.
Yes. Look, Renoir would probably be able to effeminize a pro wrestling champ, if he if he was given the chance. But to me, this is a nice comparison to the previous portraits, because the sitter here as an aristocrat just does have a different idea about masculinity and masculine dressing than the previous men have had, right? If we had said to Louis XVI or even to Napoleon, put on this black frock, they would both have said, like, you want me to wear what? And so there are certain forms of aristocratic comportment and dressing that I think survive into the 19th century, and part of that is that nicer shirt and that slightly more feminine comportment that is also an expression of class, I think, just as much as of anything.
Being comfortable with that, exactly. I also wonder, because, as you know, Caillebotte started buying the paintings of his friends quite early, when he was just beginning to paint. And I wonder if his decision to make black suits blue, which it might come a little bit from Renoir's blues, because they were already so much a part of his aesthetic, because that is something that I love about the exhibition, where you think of these men, they should be wearing black, but he articulates them with this wonderful, rich blue. And then the exhibition is about, male experience in a patriarchal society. But one of the things you find with Caillebotte is that he is not aristocratic. He's first-generation wealth, and his father worked very hard to be able to let the boys not have to work. But he's also very comfortable with his family in many ways, or he's comfortable with the codes of that class, don't you think? I mean, he's not fighting. He's living with them. He's not saying, I got to get out of the house, this is awful. And of course, I would stay if I had a butler with my parents. Wouldn't you, if you thought every whim could be satisfied? Yeah. But if we're looking at this, I think what we thought was interesting about it was just this is his personal comment on his own family life. And as you know, it's a very small and dark painting, but it should be bigger and it should be brighter, because there's so much going on in it.
Yes, I agree that half of the picture is a personal comment about his family. His father had died, so that seat at the front of the picture, that half plate, is in fact empty, partly occupied now by him, but also not. And so what I like about Caillebotte's paintings so much, and this one in particular, is that he is not just thinking about how to represent men in the pictures, but what it means for that presumptive space in front of the picture, which in the 19th century is a male space, is the viewer is a presumptively male figure, what it means to thematize that position in relationship to the picture. So we have these relationships of men that are depicted and anonymous viewing positions that are then related in very complex ways to the scene itself. And this picture is just the best example of that, right? Here is that head of the table in a bourgeois household, empty, a figure of the death of his father, but also empty for anybody who steps in front of the picture to imaginatively occupy. And that seems to me an exciting thought experiment, image experiment in itself.
And that's something that when you're going through the exhibition to think about, is that where is the artist? And that I find that is just so intriguing and more, in some ways, more outrageous and provocative than any of the Impressionists who did figure paintings, that there is just this sense of where is the artist? He's so close and he's so attentive to what is going on. And I love this comparison with the butler who, at the time when he's now been the butler for the brothers who have moved out of the family home, and now he's getting ready to retire, and Caillebotte paints him in the overcoat of the bourgeois gentleman, just giving him the codes of dress that would have allowed him to be part of the world that he lived in. And the idea that Caillebotte he was not uncomfortable with his class, and he was also very open to other classes, and he was against actually class distinctions while retaining his own place. And you see that a little bit with his portrait of his brother René at the window, where he shows him in every man's dress, kind of. Yeah. And we were just talking about the brother Martial, so his youngest brother, the one who is the reason we have the descendants. I think he's wearing kind of a house coat or something. It just seems so relaxed, even though he is so serious. He's in his own home. He's owning his space. And so the brothers, they're just, each one of them was so interesting.
No, I agree. For me, what these paintings evoke is, again, the question, like in the previous slide, what are we doing there as viewers? Obviously, the two brothers live together, right? So to the two of them, this scene in the middle makes perfect sense, right? Gustave Caillebotte saw René standing at the window all the time looking, not anything special. But if you saw this painting in the Impressionist exhibit and you didn't know this context, you were like, we are in a bourgeois home of a couple probably. So the viewing position immediately is gendered in a particular way, because I don't know who else lives with his brother. And if I had to live with my brother, what a. Anyway, I'll stop that thought right before it teeters off into something I'll regret.
No, and it's also, again, Caillebotte was praised in some ways by the critics of Impressionist exhibitions for having a more masculine touch and for knowing how to draw, and it looks like he took time in his paintings as opposed to a Monet who looked like he slapped it off, the idea of impression being the reason. And but I think that there is something also to be said with a topic of a man playing the piano. If you didn't know if it was his brother and you just said, why is this guy painting a man? Because women, that was the art d'agrément. That was what women did besides sewing and dressing up. They played piano, they read novels. And so it is, again, that paradox between his way of painting, very structured, very showing the drawing that went into it, and the topics, the themes that he painted. And here's the perfect example, I think, of that yin-yang of Caillebotte.
Yes. So for most men in the 19th century, the military is one of those spaces where male bonds get forged, where male sociability is practiced. And we have a young soldier here who Caillebotte is looking at very intently, but clearly not in a moment where around Caillebotte there would be hundreds of scenes in the salon of the Franco-Prussian War, soldiers in action, soldiers dying. You could find that figure depicted thousands of times. But what you have here is a soldier at rest, hands in pockets, smoking a cigarette, staring off a little bit in the distance. So there is a bit of sensuality in that look and in that posture and in that observation that Caillebotte mixes in with that hyper-masculine figure at the center of this painting.
Absolutely, and that's that Renoir blue again coming out. And then you see, I mean, he in the sketches that he does even before he started taking painting classes with Léon Bonnat, you see that he sometimes inserts these little infantrymen in the background. If you're looking, it's like he needed a splash of red, but he's going to make it the pantaloons of these infantrymen. And he himself, after having served during the Franco-Prussian War, he had to go back and kind of do the reserve. So he was continually, at least until 1886, he was part of the military experience and would have had friends and bonds with them. Now we get to the crux of the matter. Yeah. So what this painting on the left does, the one that Orsay bought, the reason that they decided to do this exhibition, to me, what it makes me want to do is rip off all those frock coats of those men in the exhibition and see if they're wearing such a beautiful shirt. I love this blue and white, and then you wonder what's underneath those other guys. This man is showing off.
Okay, Gloria, I thought you were ripping off a lot more than just the jacket there for a second. But
no, I'm talking about
good,
in the exhibition. No, I'm hands off. Paintings.
Yeah, the jacket is right there, right? So, but what that simple gesture of taking that jacket off does is to insinuate that we are in a space that is both awkward but also comfortable, right? There is somebody close to this figure who's rowing, who's sitting outside of the picture, who is again somebody who is there. We are not exactly invited into this picture, right? We are already necessarily there as soon as we approach, right? We are not asked to come in, or there's no hand gesture or a back that we can imaginatively occupy. As soon as we step in front of it, we have sat down in this boat. And that is not a formal situation, but one that's oddly comfortable, right? Because this man is fairly comfortable with being looked at a close range. He's looking away a little bit, right? I always think that is a bit of an acknowledgement of the weird proximity here between viewer and subject. He's just staring off a little bit to the side, but the erotics of this are just so pronounced, right? That sort of torso and that crotch and that's so close by, you know. And I think Caillebotte is completely testing here what it might mean for a presumptively male viewer to step in front of a painting and be acknowledged as that fully.
And we don't know who he is, but it's kind of every man. It's his class. It's an avatar for himself. And you'll see that again. You see it in our painting, Paris Street, Rainy Day. We don't know who it is, but it's someone that has a larger representation. It's a fascinating painting. And then in the background, you see the more anonymous rowers, which is the subject of the one on the right. That where you don't see any personality at all, but what you are confronted with is their incredible musculature, and that if you think about the floor scrapers that you're going to see, it's that same motion, and he's really interested in what happens to men when they're wearing a shirt that allows them to express, in some ways, their physical presence, very much so. It's an incredible painting, and of course he's smoking a pipe, which is just what you do when you're out doing exerting. But I think, when I look at these, I think that these are posed, as opposed to the next series that you get where they're more like almost Gumby-like. They're just not anatomically as interesting, but these have that sort of really, he's studying them, he's there, he's watching everything they're doing. Do you get that?
Yes, and that comes through in particular in that motion towards us, right? There is a closeness here between the viewer and the picture, right? Especially on the right, right? Those hands are so close to our space. They are about 2 inches away from breaking through, and that is an invitation to be really close to somebody, to almost not just see their physicality, but to be so close that one could probably even smell it, and that is a very unusual viewing position for any painting, especially for an impressionist. And that is thought through, that is studied, that is composed. These figures were. Caillebotte wasn't making these pictures on the spot, clearly, So, and for those reasons, they take on this heightened psychic dynamic that I think is so important.
As opposed to these, where you get this sense that they're in motion and he can't ask them to stop. You're like, huh, stop. And so he just doesn't seem to have the same, that's not his purpose. Here is to show the paddle in the water of these kind of kayaky boats that were called périssoires, these lightweight, and how they are moving in motion, either racing or pleasure, but more racing. It seems more competitive in this sense. And then you see Caillebotte with his buddies with these strange little oars that, he's very careful to describe the effect. But if you actually start taking it apart anatomically, these men don't work. They just don't fit in those boats the way they should. But when nobody cares about that. And also, it's just showing how, while he's not an impressionist, he certainly has an interest. He's not an impressionist in the way impressionist was described at that time, as unfinished, as fluttery. But he does have a real interest in light. And in that room where you just feel like you're immersed in kind of an orangerie-like feeling, where you have these water horizons right above. And I find that really striking. And I wish he could have shown them in a circle of some sort, because they really work that way. We were fortunate to get a lot of those. And of course, this is where, again, that high horizon line, the people coming into your space, really is so apparent and so much a characteristic of Caillebotte's aesthetic.
Yes, and when I step in front of the main one on the left, it is a reflection about the work that is going on here, but also the looking that is part of that work. Right, I'm always drawn to the 2 male workers at right, and that they're actually looking at one another, right? Are they learning from one another? Are they observing what they're doing? Is this a bit of a competitive action, right? Am I a little faster than you? It's not exactly easy to know. And that look that the 2 of them share is then replicated with the look that we bring into the image as we step in front of it. So there is a triangulation there that helps us a little bit and justifies why we are looking at the scene to begin with, which is so unusual and
and then again, as you saw in the exhibition, all those studies. So this was in his family home. They're working on the studio that's going to be his, where he's going to paint Paris Street Rainy Day. But it's also that idea of he's asked them to pose or something. He's caught them, but he's also able to really study them in a way. And so to your point of making sure that they are placed in a way that we are able to study them as well. And we were both talking about how elongated those arms are. Somehow it works, but they're super long arms, but it's really emphasizing that action that you saw in the boating paintings too. And it's just his way of almost paying homage to the craft that these men are performing inside the home, which he relates to his own craft of painting and starting a painting and finishing a painting. So it's one of the showstoppers. And you can imagine when he showed this at the salon, thinking that it's got everything. It's got perspective. It's got male anatomy. And they were just like, no. And so when he shows it with the Impressionists, it's much more applauded for that, and it's also applauded for the virile and the masculine treatment of the paint itself, not just the subject matter, but the way it's painted. Should we move on? Oh my gosh, yeah. The one on the right we did not get. Unfortunately, it was one of those that got away from us. There are only about a handful that we would have loved to have had, but we did pretty well. But it's just the idea, again, doesn't pay models. And how do you paint mental activity? How do you paint intellectual movement? And I think he brilliantly succeeds in a way that no one, as far as I know, in the Impressionist circle has ever taken this on, this compressed space.
Yeah, that concentration, also that closeness between them and those books, and Henri Cordier in particular. Right? Again, if I imagine myself relating to him, working, if when I'm writing a sentence or trying to write something, if somebody were like 2 feet away, I'd be like, get away. You know?
2 feet, yeah.
It's such an intimate moment in which we are intruding and have almost come too close, right? And yet he's not acknowledging that closeness.
And I think it's because he's so close to both of these that he can get that close, because they're not self-conscious around him, because they are part of his relationship circle. That's. And then the one in the middle is another one that got away. It's supposedly in Chicago, so if anyone knows where it is, you have my email. But so when everyone dies, his father, his brother, and his mother within 5 years, and he and his brother moved to the Gold Coast of Paris and Boulevard Haussmann, and they have this luxury apartment that has this wraparound balcony on the 4th floor with an elevator. And then the balcony becomes another site. You know, you've had the water, you've had the studio, and now we're out of the interior and we're in another room that's an extension of the brothers' apartment. And I find these also extremely intimate in their casualness.
Yeah, it's an intimacy that presumes that it is interesting to watch other men on a balcony owning the city, you know, in the sort of looking down on the city, looking from above, and we are taking the time and the pleasure in watching them perform that ownership and perform it so differently, right? The figure at the center. Who is even going to see him up there on the 1st floor posing like that? You know, it's like so the other two on the sides seem to me almost a little bit more appropriate and natural in the way one would look from up there. And so that pose at the center seems to me much more organized to be for somebody who's behind him in that apartment, looking at him, looking out over the city. Right? So again, it becomes this exercise of looking through bourgeois men at their achievements, at their symbolic position in the city, in the world. Yeah.
And it's interesting that the flanking ones stayed in the family collection, so they were never given or bought or anything, and the one in the middle immediately went to presumably the sitter and was out of the family early on. And then this is another example of the brothers' apartment, but this intense fraternité, you know, this brotherhood, he seeks groups, whether they're the boaters, whether they're the workers, you know, he likes to be part of something. At the same time, he is the one that is documenting what he's part of. And I find this one from the Louvre Abu Dhabi is one of the showstoppers. It's just, yeah.
Yeah, it's the one male group portrait that we have, right? So in that sense, it's unusual to begin with, to group these 6 friends of him around him. They are playing cards, and as far as I know, right, I can't play Bezique. Hopefully I'll learn it at some point in my life. I would love that. But I think only the 2 people right at the table are actually playing. And so, which means that more than half of the men who are in this picture are actually looking at other men playing. So they are observing, they are looking at their the card hands. Richard Geller, who's standing in the back, is looking at the movement of the hands. So it's a picture that's both about male sociability, male play, but also, again, about a space in which men very comfortably look at each other, and even in the back, right, the figure who's lounging, it's become a very comfortable male social environment through these gestures of comfort.
Right, and the male that's kind of closing his eyes is the one you see in the full-length figure. But, you know, you imagine that Degas or Monet or Renoir, they would have also had moments of male sociability. The difference is they never painted it. It never was going to be part of their commercial strategy for getting their name out. And Caillebotte dares and wants to really express the sensualness and the camaraderie of his world, which was not so different. I mean, it's a patriarchal world, but he's actually showing it, and on a grand scale, so really monumentalizing it. And there they are. We have to kind of speed up, so I'll just let you know. The Richard Gallo is always the smaller one, and he was 1.55 centimeters, which I think is about 5 feet. So you see him, he'll show up again. Here he is in 6 of the paintings in the exhibition, and one which we didn't get, which Richard walking his dog, the poodle Dick. And you can just see how Caillebotte, how he really is important to Caillebotte. We don't know a lot about him, but he is the one perennial in his entourage who seems to, as a man of leisure, as a bachelor, always be available to pose, to sit, to be comfortable, whether it's a couple's painting. We should probably skip a couple of these so we can get to some others. Here he is again, you know, and he's allowing himself to be really small on the divan. He has no problem. He knows his friend well enough to know that his friend has another intention for this painting. This is not a portrait. Anything you want to say about that? And just to remind ourselves that Caillebotte, while we don't know anything about we just don't know enough about. There's probably boxes of letters that are burned somewhere, and that's something we need to find out. But we do know he had a female companion in the last 13 or 14 years of his life. She was 15 years younger than he was. Her name was Charlotte. And because he didn't pay models, it's undoubtedly Charlotte who is in these couples paintings that are in the exhibition. But what he does do, again, with that yin-yang of masculine subject matter, but also feminizing it by putting men in settings that they would not normally, at least in public exhibitions, public paintings, be seen, is the role of the divan. You want to talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. And as I think you saw with the other Richard Gallo paintings as well, right? He becomes a kind of cipher that can move into different roles, into different places. Sometimes it's very large and is totally miniaturized. Sometimes he sits on this couch here on the right as if he's much taller than he is, and Monsieur Rare completely disappears into that sofa. So what Caillebotte is so brilliant at, I think, is that slight play, right? This nudging of expectations that one brings towards pictures, narrative scenes about their gendering, where in the previous one, right, the front figure now reads the newspaper and the Gallo in the back is reading a novel. So in those reading habits, gender expectations are switched. On the Rare on the left, right, lounges a bit on this couch in a pose, right, an odalisque kind of pose that would be coded very feminine in the history of art. So Caillebotte is just extremely subtle in blending those codes, again, in order to question a little the presumptions around on male comportment and male viewing that I think he encounters everywhere where he looks.
Yeah, great. But well, then of course you get to the center ring of the exhibition of the man at his bath, and obviously the same model at his bath, but in a much unfinished state. And this is something that is still remains provocative. It was during his lifetime. It was a painting that he really wanted to make and show. Right? Do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, sure.
But this is what André wrote about in the catalog, along with Jonathan Katz.
Yes, these two paintings they are unusual. They are unprecedented. There's nothing else in the Impressionist canon that quite matches them, for a couple of reasons. It's not uncommon that there is male nudity in painting. It is actually everywhere, in history paintings, in mythological paintings, I think male nudity is everywhere in artistic training in the 19th century. It's how one became an expert in drawing bodies to begin with. So none of that is at all unusual. But to make a large-scale painting like the one on the left, which is life-size, in what appears to be a private bathroom. It's probably a mobile bathroom, right, and a mobile tub, and but it's certainly a home space, right? It's not a public bath or a public bathing scenario. We could just go forward once for a second, right, where the other Impressionists who painted male bathers, right, they put them out of doors, where everybody is perfectly comfortable being seen and somehow comfortable. I don't know whether anybody is comfortable in that Cézanne, but nobody is comfortable in a Cézanne painting. I hope you get my point. And can you go back? Can you go back? Yep. Yeah. Oh, is that okay? Can you? Okay, great. And so to be with another man who has just bathed in a private bathroom, that is a terribly strange scenario. Okay, I hope you all agree with that. And he has turned around, right? So I think there are issues of he's not presenting himself frontally. So there are some issues of propriety here, I think, at work. He's turning towards the window. I don't know, when I showered in my hotel room this morning and the bathroom is tiny, I did get out to dry off in the room. But would I do that right in front of the window? Probably not, right? So he has turned in order to have some sense of privacy towards us. But at the same time, we are staring at his buttocks, right? If you stood in front of the picture, you know that your nose is right in the buttock area. And so I think what Caillebotte is doing here, let's leave the whole question of Caillebotte's sexuality to one side, right? It's an interesting question and it should be asked. And who knows, we will never know, just because Caillebotte didn't have the language to express himself that we have now. But to make that painting, he knew that he would invoke a set of new desires and new forms of erotic relationships by placing the presumptive male viewer of the 19th century picture in relationship to a nude male contemporary body drying himself off. And that is an action that I think is very self-conscious. That is the provocation here. And I think it's amazing.
Let's go quickly to show the... because I think, let's go on to this one, because I think we think they're pendants, and we think they were made around the same time. The boots are very similar, the palette is similar, but he was not comfortable painting the female anatomically. I mean, his male is amazing. I mean, it's beautifully constructed, and this is a painting that caused a lot of, Kirk Vonnegut writes a whole chapter on it in the 1970s, but now compared to the man at his bath, it just doesn't have the same power. You really find yourself looking at the divan and the patterns on the divan, because it's an uncomfortable painting. It's to me, I don't know if but it has the same immediacy where the man has his footprints that shows he's just come out. She has her waistband, which shows she's just taken off her skirt. So there's a lot of similarities, but I think for me, it seems like he is actually more comfortable with the male figure, dressed and undressed in his actual painting experience. We need both. You need both to understand how we called it reinventing the nude, which he certainly was at that time. This also was never shown. He tried to show the man at his bath in 1888 with these two other paintings, and it was sequestered into another room and not part of the major avant-garde exhibition of the 20 in Brussels. So it meant a lot to him, and he tried to show it the next year at Durand-Ruel, and the dealer in Paris would not take it. So it was too much. It was a bridge too far, but it meant something very important to Caillebotte. Then we have the wonderful photo of Caillebotte. We don't quite know why he's dressing exactly like an 1868 woman would have dressed as he's in this carte de visite. So it was at a studio. He had a proper photograph taken of it. And he's serious. I mean, he's got the wig, he's got the, this is not just play acting, he's really acting. But we just don't know what it's for. So it's just so many questions about the artist that we're just now starting to peel off, I think.
Yes, I agree. Amazing photograph. We don't have photographs like this of, I can't think of any other artist of the period who
striped blouse,
Right. And he probably had this dress made. This was for a costume ball. I think this is fairly clear.
Yes.
But the impetus behind it, and to have this photograph taken, there are really profound things around gender and sexuality in operation in Caillebotte. If those are self-motivated, or if Caillebotte, and I think my answer is sort of perfectly divided between the two, saw really broad shifts in the culture of masculinity and sexuality around him, right? And articulated them more, focused on them more than any of his contemporaries, because they are interesting. This is part of modern life for him, right? This is just as interesting as somebody walking down on the Pont de l'Europe, or any of the other modern life subjects, right? The kind of changing gendered and sexual practices are part of that modern life. And I think he veers into that direction as his form of specialization in modern life painting. And yeah.
And he was still living with his family when this photo was made, and with his brothers and everything. And he still has a very square jaw. He can never really pull it off, but sartorially, he's doing a good job. So then we'll close out with rethinking our painting. What have we kind of learned from this conversation? And I think André has some wonderful things to say about the couple in the front.
When I stepped after seeing, I saw the exhibition in Paris, and then I was so thrilled to see it here. I missed the Getty installation, which I'm very sorry to say. I stepped in front of this painting, which I've seen so many times and just love. That it is about a confrontation with another man in an urban environment. We are walking towards a couple, absolutely, and their arms are interlocked, but our initial confrontation, the thing that is, 3 seconds away, right, is us walking into another man. And either our umbrella or their umbrella will have to move to the side. And it's that negotiation, right, between the viewer and that male figure at the center that structures the whole picture, right? That's the unavoidable confrontation. That's the place we have been given if we step in front of this picture. And in the same way that some of the other pictures gave us this unavoidable place to be at.
Yeah, we were talking about the way it kind of echoes what you see in the Canotier, the one with the blue-white striped, where he's looking off to the side, but he's kind of an avatar for Caillebotte's comfortableness and being so close, and just we're not portraitizing him and we're not confronting him, but he is very much the center of our attention. And I think that's really interesting. We've always looked at this painting one way, but I got a new appreciation for our painting. And in the exhibition, I just don't think they could have done this exhibition without it, because it really brings together a lot of the themes we've been talking about. So we're going to stop here, and we have time for questions. So if you will raise your hand, we'll get a mic over to you. We have about 8 minutes, it looks like, for questions. So thank you. Thank you, André. Thank you.
We have a question on your left.
Oh, I'm sorry. Up front? Right? Yes? You?
Oh, Gloria, we have a question on your
question
left.
on the left? Oh,
Over
you're
here,
over here. Okay. Well, then you can call them out. Thank you.
Yeah, just quickly, the carte de visite that you showed, where he's essentially in drag. It's interesting that if you want to go to the gift shop, there's Amaury Chardot's book, his biography of Gustave, called Caillebotte, Painting is a Serious Business. He shows that. He's a descendant of Gustave, right? And the facing text, as André suggested briefly, that was taken in 1868 when he was in the law faculty. And right next door was the École Polytechnique, and they had a mass ball. And the photographer was the official photographer for the École Polytechnique. So Chardot's point is that this was part of the mass ball culture. It was very common even for men, to dress as women and celebrate it and show it. So I think that is also an important historical context. And I'm as queer as a $3 bill, but I don't think that. I think we should be wary of veering too much into a sense that this is somehow indicative of a sensibility. That's my point.
No question. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Can I quickly respond? I completely agree. I also think we should hesitate just as much normalizing this. And pretending it's just an everyday act that just seemed to happen, because I don't think we have that much evidence of it, and it's not something every man in bourgeois Paris did. So I do think there are more deeper issues at work here, right? We won't know them, but I do think they are here, and I don't want to trivialize them either. It's somehow our answer to this photograph has to take account of both possibilities, I think.
Over here. Thank you. I'm enjoying this immensely. I'm a big fan of Caillebotte. Maybe he is my #1 preferred painter. And if I could have the floor scrapers in my home, it would just be amazing. And my question is, I'm intensely curious to ask this, and I don't mean to raise something controversial, but it is. I'm intensely curious to know why the name of the exhibition was changed from Painting Men to Painting His World. Who changed it and why?
Okay, thank you for asking that. The title change came before it opened in Paris, and I remember calling or talking to André about it. We, in this brainstorming session, came up with Painting Men. We thought that was a really straight-on title. I work in an institution, and there's a lot of voices that are around what is good for what we're doing. And so it was decided that we would call it Painting Men as opposed to, Painting His World, which was more about relationships as well as the men involved in those relationships. So that's how it got changed long before it opened in Paris. And I, of course, thought it would be confusing because I was worried people wouldn't buy the catalog because they'd see. However, we've sold out of catalogs, so that didn't make a difference. But I still think it's confusing. I would have, of course, preferred it, but I'm also I work with the institution. I think it's also a good title. Yes. Oh, did somebody else?
Thank you. Saying Painting His World, a lot of the views of the world and the exterior that we get in this collection and in his most famous paintings are of what to us seemed like an almost cliche view of Paris, but at that point was still very new, within living memory for maybe not all of his contemporaries, but certainly a number of the viewers, and certainly a lot of the not just the bourgeois viewers, but also of the floor scrapers and their families. They would have been there for the reconstruction under Napoleon III with Baron Haussmann of Paris. Some of them would have had deals that are 2-3 degrees separated, but still making money of it. And some of them would have probably had family who lost limbs in that. And so there is a lot of different kinds of masculinity that went into that then very new reshaping of Paris that is presented in these grand vistas of a bourgeois gentleman looking on at this resplendent eternal city as meticulously designed. How does that tie in to the idea of your own masculinity? How does that very recent rupture that by now to us seems so permanent, and surely Paris was always like that, how does that tie into the way that the men occupied those spaces, having seen it built and also having seen what came some of them before, so having seen the ramparts in the cramped streets of the old Paris that was explicitly demolished?
Shall I try? It's I hope we didn't present a world of Caillebotte painting men in which we presented an image as if this is a completely plural world of a really wide range of masculinities. It's not. It is painted from Caillebotte's very particular social position that he occupies, right? Not just financially, not just in terms of gender, in terms of the whole place and the symbolic order that he occupies, in terms of the law, in terms of language, in terms of representation, and it's painted from that position, right? And it is, and the pictures of labor that you see here are always painted from somebody standing at the door or in that room looking down at those floor scrapers and the like. So the whole image realm here is marked by that bourgeois position from which Caillebotte paints. And it is much more open, however, than any other set of painterly eyes to that working experience than I know of. Even in the Paris Street Rainy Day, right? Look at the house painter who is in the back here. It's painted from a bourgeois position, but with an eye that is open to a whole range of male classed experiences that are marked by history, by war, by death caused by labor, and all of that, right? It's still painting, right? And so it's hard, I think, for someone Caillebotte to face that true reality of it. Which 19th century painting actually really faced the reality of 19th century existence.
Yeah. Still an artist. Are there any other questions? I think we have time for maybe one more.
Gloria, we have one on your right.
I believe it was in the short video that's part of the exhibition that it was mentioned that Caillebotte left a number of paintings to the state, and a certain number were accepted, but it looked like maybe half weren't. Is there any knowledge or documentation or speculation about what those paintings were or where they may be?
Oh, we know exactly which paintings they were.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, we know exactly which ones they were.
I need a list.
The state tried to buy back those paintings twice, and by the 1920s, the family was like, forget about it. And a lot of them ended up in the Barnes collection, interestingly enough, because Mr. Barnes was, that was his period of great collecting. So we actually do know everything that was in. And for those of you who did see the exhibition in Paris, if you'll remember, on the 5th floor, they aggregated all of the Paris, the ones that were accepted, into 3 galleries, which was wonderful. It was the only, because usually they're integrated with the rest of the collection, but you could see just how important they were, and what would the Musée d'Orsay be without them? Not the same. Thank you. Thank you again for coming, and yeah, good job.